Welcome to Numbers Therapy, Episode 8. Wow. So today we are going to be talking about the side of stables, because that's been in the news, and the kind of implications there, because there's a lot of different directions to take it in general as it relates to us. So, like usual, we've got some good folks on today that we can get to sit back and learn from. Purpose, of course, of Numbers Therapy is talk through macro stuff and bring on and showcase our experts in here, and today is no different. And the goals we have, right, so that everyone can understand how all of the big picture things fit together, make better decisions with NFTs and other investments using a balanced perspective, learn about or from some of our people on here and get just general different perspectives, and then learn about different areas and opportunities that exist out there as well, and different ways of thinking. And so the reminder, like I always give, different levels that we have in here. And I think for today's topic, maybe even more so. So as a result, we need to make sure, everybody's along for the full ride. So if you feel like you have a question that, you may think is a little bit elementary or otherwise, please ask it. There are probably other people thinking the same thing and have the same question. And it's just really important that everybody, kind of come along for the ride in the full conversation and get the most out of it possible. So, we've got the two channels here. We've got office hours chat, and then we've got the guest questions. Needless to say, please drop your questions into guest questions if you have, and I'll weave them in along the way or put them on the back end where they fit best. And then important note and disclaimer that none of what you hear in here is financial advice. It is all opinions. So without further ado, today we've got our first duo on the show, so that's a milestone and pretty cool. This duo, they're repeat regulars in our VC and always have good insight and perspectives, not just on NFTs, but in crypto and beyond. And they're going to be representing both coasts today, both New York and California, respectively, though neither has publicly disclosed their official position on Shake Shack versus In-N-Out. What's pretty cool too is they come from pretty different backgrounds as well, and so that'll also be an interesting topic to talk on. Most specifically, though, for today, I wanted to bring them on as they have some good knowledge and perspective on the recent stable crash and the implications from a variety of angles moving forward that I thought would be very valuable to everyone. So, with that in mind, welcome Deathstrike and McPuss. What's going on, guys?
How's it going? Thanks for having us as well.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thrilled to have you guys on. This is a really cool conversation, and very openly, this is a topic that I know some about, but I'm really excited to hear about it from you guys as well, and learn along with everyone too. So, so first off, maybe you guys can tell everyone a bit about your backgrounds, how you got into trading in NFTs, maybe what you were doing prior. A bit of background, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
You want to go for it? Deathstrike?
Yeah, right.
Good. Go ahead, guys. Maybe Deathstrike, you want to go first?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll jump in here. Yeah, so I kind of pretty roundabout path to NFTs. I think a lot of us kind of feel that way. But yeah, I worked in corporate for 10 years, doing mostly finance and tech stuff. And so that was like kind of just my traditional 9 to 5 background. And then kind of on the side, I like to do a lot of on the side things to kind of learn. So I traded a lot in sports betting and daily fantasy sports. That was kind of my gateway to NFTs at some point, and a lot of my early trading experience before jumping into crypto and stuff. And then I also do some VC angel stuff on the side. The small family and friends fund. So always been very heavily involved in like math, numbers, money, and left my 9 to 5 in Jan 2021, completely unrelated to crypto at all. Didn't even think that would be my next step. But one thing led to another with like Top Shot and NFTs, and just seeing the incredible upside that is in the crypto space, particularly with NFTs, kind of how I jumped in. So it's a little bit about me.
Nice. And plus, you got a bit of a different background, which is going to provide some good contrast for us today, I think, right?
Yeah, I have like no formal background like that. went to college, never finished that. I was just working for a family company. Before I quit last year, but crypto wise, I got into it like 2013 because of the Silk Road. Like Bitcoin back then. Um, so it was always like in the back of my mind. 2017, 2018. Started getting into it again as it was back in the news. And I was bartending at the time, and just started dumping like every dollar I had into it. And I'm like one of those people that like once I get interested in something, like it just consumes all my time. So it's I was like on crypto Twitter. That's where I was like getting all my alpha. Just getting like wrecked on my own. Trial by fire. So I've lost an insane amount of money learning the hard way through all this. But I don't know. I think that was like I kind of like taking that way. It was interesting. So yeah, and then NFTs. Like I said, just being on crypto Twitter. I thought Bored Ape Yacht Club was a clothing company at first. Just seeing it on like on crypto Twitter, and then yeah, and NFTs kind of just happened for me. It was just yeah, it just happened.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I love the fact that you guys have different roads that you took here, right? Because it's kind of like the epitome of what we are in here in general, and I think will also give us some like good different vantage points too. So, okay, with that in mind, then for each of you, and it's kind of like a just how you think about things. Like, how do NFTs contrast with crypto for you guys, like from an investment standpoint? And I think it's particularly great to ask you guys because you both come from some version of crypto before, different points, of course, but like some version of crypto before. It sounds like as well. So yeah, I'd love to hear about what how you guys treat NFTs, think about NFTs versus crypto from an investment standpoint.
Yeah, I'm really interested in hearing McPuss take, so I'll go really quickly here. NFTs really interesting, right? Like I think one of the things we've talked about a little bit is they're extremely liquid, and so they have this weird intersection between I think they have incredible upside and just from how quickly in a time frame this particular asset can jump and how you can capture a lot of that upside like almost incomparable, right? And combining that with the fact that like, I guess people in MEHQ I wouldn't call like normal crypto people, but certainly the ability to have access to acquiring this asset or at an earlier point than just about anything that I could in my normal life, right? Like I can't really get into startup investments that early, given people do like family rounds and things like that. I certainly can't get insider information on stocks that early and like move on that stuff. Just the amount of sheer upside that comes with NFTs and like an asset class that being early on and being able to get in a really early entry on was just absolutely fascinating to me. And so I see that almost as like a very different asset from crypto, kind of in its own world. So that's kind of been my take on things, but happy to hear McPuss.
Yeah, go for it, McBus. Definitely want to hear.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Deathstrike. I think the illiquidity is huge. Um, you can't just dump 100 NFTs at once. You have people screaming at you for breaking the floor. They won't sell for weeks. Um, so I think that's huge. And then the one thing that trips me out about NFTs is how isolated they are from like just not just crypto in general, but like what's going on in like I guess the greater macro economy. It's like we're in our own little bubble, and I don't know. Sometimes I think it's a good thing. Sometimes I think it's a bad thing. Like equities are crashing, like Bitcoin's taking a shit, and then like NFTs are just booming, like gas is up, all just because NFT mints. So like I don't know, like it's that whole like ignorance is bliss thing, I guess. And it tripped me out at first. Like I was like, there's no way NFTs are gonna take off, and like with everything that's going on. But I mean, here we are. So, I don't know. That trips me out sometimes. I still get
That's
tripped out about NFTs.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I mean, I wonder if like how much of it it's like the formula for that I feel like is like part degens, right, who stay attached and like it, but also partly, right, it's just still so nascent and exciting that there's like a lot of upside that exists. Maybe that's the formula. I don't know. It's a good point you're making though.
Yeah, it's like, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like um, oh shit, I don't know what I was gonna say. Like it kind of reminds me of like like the ICO stuff back in like was it like 2017, 2018, like early 2017. It's just
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's just up and down instantly, like in and out.
yeah, yeah. That parallel makes complete sense. And also, I mean, I think Deathstrike, to your point too, right? With these being illiquid, maybe that also provides a little bit of a barrier and protection, right? So that like big institutions, hedge funds, things like that can't come in as easily, right? Because then they'd have to have somebody sitting there flipping or some technology to be able to aid it too. So I don't know. I've always thought about that side of it too, of that providing a barrier for us potentially. I don't know. Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I certainly think it helps because it kind of like almost in this weird way it slows down the adoption from that side, which gives us more time to kind of like flourish in this market. At the same time, you'll need that to enter at some point more so. So for like exit liquidity and stuff like that. So very interesting to think about that balance.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about the main thing that we're talking about today for a bit. So let's touch on stable coins, but I want to start from, if we can, from like ground zero, because again, we're an NFT group first, and of course crypto as a result of that, right? And I think we've all become pretty educated, in crypto. But let's just start with stable coins. What are stable coins? Why are they needed? Can anyone just create one? Can you guys just give like maybe a bit of a 101 for everybody so that we're all primed at the same place?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So what was the first part of the question? Or
So
what are
what are
stablecoins?
stable coins? Why are they needed? And can anyone just create one, right? I mean, I think we all know generally what stable coins are, of course, but
Yeah, just like a hedge against volatility. I mean, shit's crashing, you want some place to park your money. They're supposed to be safe, but like we saw with like UST, definitely not safe. Also like in on ramp to crypto. I mean, we're all on ramping via US dollars. So it's on ramp liquidity, hedge against volatility. Um, kind of how I see them.
that makes sense. And the question that I'm sure people have always thought about it, can anybody just create a stable coin? Is there a limitation that exists there? How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone can create one. Like, look at like shit, what is it? Well, like I mean, you saw UST. There's like USDD. I mean, like anyone can create one. There's a what is it? PUSD, which is like I think Dopex or JPEG DAO just created like their own stable coin backed by like NFTs, and they have like a curve pool. Um, I'm not sure how theirs works to be honest yet. But yeah, I mean, like even if someone created one, doesn't mean you have to use it. Like, check out CoinGecko, dude. There's like 85 different stables.
Yeah. Well, and what's like the big limitation for creating a stable, right? Is it just the backing, basically, which I think in some cases has been removed, right, because of like algos and things like that. But like, what's the main limitation for people? If I wanted to just create my own stable right now, what would be the limitation that exists? Would you say?
Yeah, I would say the backing. Like we know, like Tether early days, there's like a lot of FUD and questions around what they're really backed by. I think a lot of that, at least in my opinion, is kind of been answered. I wouldn't say maybe not answered is the best question, but settled, I guess. I don't see Tether being as like deserving of the FUD they get now. I think they're a little more established in the space. But like USDC, like all their reserves are pretty transparent. You got DAI over collateralized, super transparent, all on chain, stuff like that. But yeah, I'd say you're backing. I mean, I can't just start up a stable coin with $50. What am I only be able to sell $50 of a stable coin?
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Deathstrike, chime in also if you want to, build on top of any point or do you have any thoughts to add on?
Yeah, I think McPuss nailed it. Anybody can create a stable coin, and it just comes down to bank backing and like, you can even compare it to like TradFi fiat in a sense. Like the U.S. dollar, like if it wasn't backed by what military power, gold, a couple of other things, like it'd be worthless too, just like anything else. And so, um, kind of from a pure currency perspective, that's always in mind with what gets supported. And so once we get into the UST topic a little bit, it's really interesting the different types of stable coins, what gets supported by what, and what you can see gonna crash from a large distance away.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just to be clear, if we wanted to create an MBHQ stablecoin, we should consider starting with building a military potentially, or something that could back it pretty effectively. Is that the right summary?
Yeah, topic for yeah, I guess. But yeah.
Okay, cool. So the news, of course, that's happened. What is it? A few weeks ago, or whatever it is at this point, is UST, of course, right? UST and related Luna crash. Can you guys recap for everyone maybe what the background was on Luna UST to the extent that you know it, and then lead into what happened recently with the depegging and just what went down in general, if you can.
You want to go for it, Deathstrike, or you want?
Do you want to start with the just walking through what Luna UST is and what the burning mechanism was, and then we can kind of dig into the what happened after. You're going to be better at that part, so.
Yeah, of course, let's do it. Yeah, so I mean, it's just like it's so funny. Like I see all this stuff in my head, and it's sometimes hard to explain it. But yeah, it's just like a super simple like algo stable. Like at the end of the day, it's like UST gets overpegged. You burn UST to lessen the supply, and you print more Luna. So it's kind of like and then vice versa. UST. Oh, wait, no, UST goes overpeg. You print more, inflate the supply, brings price down. UST goes underpeg. You burn UST to raise the price. I don't know why that was so hard to explain. And then the main thing. I mean that's an algo stable at the end of the day. It's just a little I just kind of picture it as it's like a little mini circular economy. You're just burning or minting more, whether price fluctuates above or below peg. Yeah, I guess that's really an algo stable at the end of the day.
That makes sense. So, I mean, just to recap that, as I'm hearing it, right? It's just an automated mechanism that manages supply and demand to make sure that they're in balance. Is that like a pretty good summary?
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
Like there's been tons of them in the past. I think like the technical term for it is like seniorage.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't explain the term to you, but I think that's like the scientific name for them.
Very cool. And in the case of Luna specifically, or UST specifically, like what happened there exactly? Why did it depeg? What was the issue, as you understand it? Can you just explain that to everyone?
Yeah, I think it could have started in like at different times. I think the main thing was like the panic around the initial depegging. So normally you have the mint and burn mechanism, but when you add people fleeing that mint and burn mechanism, like if you picture the mint and burn as like a little circle, and then you picture people fleeing out of that circle, like that circle just starts unwinding. So you had people selling their UST, fleeing Anchor, and then selling it for Luna, and then selling their Luna and fleeing Terra's ecosystem completely. And then so that just caused like a mass unwind. And then you had leverage, like you could lever on Anchor, you could lever. Abracadabra had their degen box, which I think you could loop it. I think they looped it 5 times off the rip. So I know you had leverage all over Anchor's ecosystem or Terra's ecosystem.
So it's just like a magnified run on the bank, basically, if it sounds like what's happening. There's a little bit of unraveling, and then people started to pull out of the ecosystem, and it got majorly magnified because people had leverage on top of it. Is that
Exactly.
about right?
Yeah. And like, who knows where it like to pinpoint exactly where it happened, like there's a guy on Twitter that I follow, Fat Man Terra. I guess he was like a mod in one of their Reddit forums who's been releasing like a ton of interesting info. I'll link it in here. But it could have started back when I'm trying to type this out. Do Kwon like announcing all his Bitcoin buys to back the reserves because like nothing like Terra or was it Anchor's APY was, I mean, funded by the Terra Foundation. I mean, it's kind of I don't know. It wasn't sustainable.
Yeah. Go ahead, Deathstrike. You got something?
Yes.
Yeah. While he looks for that link, I'll pile on a little bit here. Yeah, like basically everything McPuss said. So like the seigniorage model works until a bank run happens, right? And like how does a bank run happen? A couple of factors. Number one, Anchor was offering 20% returns. And so, we live in a wonderful world of magic internet money, but at the end of the day, when the bill is due, like where does the actual liquidity come from? And that's always a concern with like a model of seigniorage, and also like if you're offering 20%, that has to come from somewhere. Like when people actually take their money out, they have to like get that 20% somewhere, right? So given that this is not an asset backed by things that are growing at 20%, you have this weird dichotomy between the amount of kind of money promised starts being more than the money that actually exists. And so for those of you who don't have as much background, like Terra Luna basically has all these different assets that it holds to kind of like have real assets backing their UST pool, basically, right? And similar to what we just talked about before with how like what backs all these different like stable coins, right? And so um it's sustainable when it's smaller, and so we can dive into the USDD topic later. But like, if you have a bank run on something like 20 mil, it's easy for like an outside source to come in and be like, sure, we'll just plug the 20 mil, right? Like whatever bank run happened, we don't want this ecosystem to die, so we'll just plug in the money itself. But Anchor got to this point where it was pretty huge. I think I want to say what 9-10 bill, and then even more than that after. So it was huge, meaning once a bank run happens on something that big, it's really hard to make it whole. Much easier to make 20 mil whole than like 2 billion. And then that on top of its like long-term thing of continuously giving 20% return meant that just the difference between how much liquidity they had versus how much they were eventually going to pay out, especially if a bank run happened, got far further and further apart. And those things are like just two things that mixed to be a complete disaster. And what you saw was kind of the actualization of that, and both those things hitting, and that bank run just completely destroying the entire ecosystem. Um, One thing we can talk about a little further, which surprised me, was I thought they could temporarily patch it with money and make it whole for a bit longer, but it just completely unwound in like a spectacular blow up fashion in a very short amount of time, and that even took me back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and there's like a bit of a bridge I want to connect to, because back like several weeks ago, I think it was, back several weeks ago when we spoke with Shaggy on here. Shaggy comes from the fixed income world, right? And we were trying to tease apart like the spectrum of risk that exists with assets, right? With kind of bonds at one end of the spectrum, for lack of a better description, and maybe NFTs at the other end of it, right? And one of the questions that we were talking about was, where does stable staking fall into it? And I think there's like, it seems to me sometimes like there's a perception that there's just plain old arbitrage that exists, right? Where the perceived risk level of stables is the same as like a bank account, let's say, for instance, or CD, but there's just extra interest rate that exists. And even though obviously this situation with UST is not great, the good part about it is that it's like bringing to light a little bit more that the risk levels are not the same for that versus like a bank account, for instance, right? A savings account or a CD or something like that. So even though the savings accounts or CDs don't exactly have like good interest rates, right? I mean, a little bit better recently. Um, it at least bringing to light the layers of risk that exist here, which are the ones that you guys said, and hack risks and technology risks and a whole variety of other things too. So with that in mind, what do you guys think is likely to happen to Luna and UST moving forward? What do you think, McPuss? Where's this going? Is there any way out?
I think it's smoked. I think it's done. I mean, like what Anchor was 80%, I think, of Terra TVL. So literally everyone was only over there. I mean, Anchor was really only started as bootstrapping for Terra, to gain users. That was like the whole 20% incentive, to get users over there and to have all these big numbers. Like, look at us, we got this big TVL, this many, daily active users, this many, unique wallets. That's really all Anchor and that high APY was for in the beginning, at least from my understanding. So now I think it's just it's gonna be like what is it? Ethereum Classic. I think it's just that it'll exist as a shitcoin, but that's about it. Um, I don't see it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Deathstrike?
Yeah,
You've seen it?
yeah, absolutely. I think he nailed the reality of it, right? It's dead. It died, right? Like that. We've seen it with multiple other coins before. It's a little jarring to see what had been essentially a top 10 coin, right? Like a true L1 just get absolutely imploded. But what they've proven from a history perspective is that algorithmic stable coins as a model, like haven't been working. I don't think they can work the way they're constructed, and so Luna's pretty dead. I think the Luna 2 thing, very interesting to see how that plays from a purely speculation perspective going forward over the next couple of months. I think you can almost treat it like a shitcoin and play it there, but yeah, like the idea of Luna backed ecosystem is pretty dead.
Yeah. So what's interesting, of course, then about this, and you guys were touching on this a little bit earlier, right? Is that this kind of is the bad apple situation, right? Where like one bad apple kind of ruins the bunch a little bit, at least from like a perception standpoint. And so I think even though it has nothing to do with it directly, they're not algo stables, for instance, right? The fall of UST in this case kind of taints many people's perceptions of stablecoins in general and how solid they are and what's real and what is vulnerabilities. So what can you guys talk to, like, what other stables, you were touching on it a bit earlier, but what other stables exist out there? What do you think has a solid structure, not a solid structure? Like, how do you think about that? You want to go ahead, McPuss?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so other stable. Oh yeah. Yeah, obviously there's USDC. And I think like the people trying to compare, like an algo stable to like an actual stable is it's kind of like I guess a not something you can really compare, like we saw after UST depegged, we saw Tether start depegging, and there was just like mass fear. Like even had people on like crypto Twitter, um, posting about it. Like granted, yeah, there was like a big imbalance in the curve pool, and it did depeg a little bit, but in my opinion, like and I'm sure some other people share this opinion, like if Tether completely depegs, I think that's kind of like the last of our worries at that point. It's gonna have a ripple effect quite a few times larger than like UST depegging. Like Tether's so intertwined in the whole crypto ecosystem. Like all futures are settled in Tether pretty much. It's the main stable on all exchanges. It's Yeah, so at that point, I think Tether depegging is the last of our worries. Um, but yeah, I mean, just in general, like I keep all my money in USDC. like when Tether depegged, there was a nice arbitrage on Curve. I think Curve hit like 5, maybe 6% at the max. So like, you know, I threw a little chunk of change at it, and you know, caught that arb. And then on exchanges, if you had a USDC on exchanges, I think you got up to like you could 10%. I think you cut down to like 90 cents. But you know, just in general, I keep my money in USDC for situations like that. That was we were in a shitty market, and that was just free money.
That's cool. And so it sounds like what you're saying is you think USDC is probably the most solid of all things considering, and that's why you keep it there.
Yeah, yeah. But I just don't think the Tether FUD is 100% warranted in my opinion. I don't know. I appreciated it on that day because it it printed free money, but you know, I don't know. I think it's gotten better.
Yeah. What do you think, Deathstrike? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll definitely reiterate the point McPuss was talking about with like, a crypto stablecoin versus a regular stablecoin. Like, look I think the disclaimer is warranted, but like at the end of the day, like, none of crypto is truly safe, right? Understand even in the stablecoin sect, it is a risk on asset. The way they're managed and backed, like a lot of it's exploratory, and so keep that in mind as you compare it to like your returns coming from somewhere, right? Even if you're taking on what is a lower risk than people perceive in like stablecoin farming for staking, for example. So definitely that. A lot of the same things as McPuss said. Like I think USDC is pretty safe because they're pretty transparently backed. Like they're by no means an algo symbol. It's backed by actual like nodes and things like that, and so that's their positioning as pretty safe. So if nothing else, and you want to keep some money there, like pretty safe and probably the safest in terms of a crypto staple that we have today. USDT, probably a longer conversation for a different time. The share with McPuss, like the sell-off was kind of overdone. Like it was just oversold fear when it depegged to like 0.9ish. And so that was a great ARB opportunity. I think people hold longer term concerns about USDT just because of the way it's backed and the way it can print money and the way it is a lot less transparent than USDC. I won't get into it here, given time, but certainly it's something that has its own flaws, and that's why people perceive it the way they do. And also, like, yeah, like what McPhus said, like, look, USDT is so large and so intertwined in crypto. It's like, not to that magnitude, but like if the US dollar became worth zero overnight, you'd have riots everywhere, so much, leverage and like actual contractual things across the world would blow up and it would just be a complete disaster. USDT, very similar on a smaller scale in that sense. Like if you're in crypto, you touch USDT in some way, and the fallout from that crashing would destroy a lot of the crypto environment. And so at that point, the actual loss of whatever small amount you had in USDT would probably be the least of your worries. And so that's something definitely to keep an eye on going forward. And then we have other ones like DAI, kind of like a more of an older technology, if you will. You have the USDD under Justin Sun. We could talk about that for a little bit if you want to. It's
Yeah.
kind of carbon copy of Luna in a sense. And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of the lay of land I think on much of the stable coins. Certainly very needed. Certainly worth your time to at least understand how the mechanisms of what they work are and how like incorporated within the crypto economy they are. If not just to understand where some of your returns might come from and also what would happen if certain, more black swan events happen in crypto.
Yeah, so we may need to have a follow-on conversation if we're hearing from people on like wanting to dig into a certain topic, for instance, like USDT or something else. I can also feel this question like maybe coming in the background of somebody asking, how specifically did you ARB USDT when it depegged or things like that? But I'm going to avoid asking that question now so I can keep us on track, and then maybe somebody will end up asking it. So, one very logical probably imminent pathway here, considering all this stuff, right, is when you have a fallout like we just had. We know that governments are going to get involved in some way, regulation, monitoring, other intervention. Where do you guys think that that's going, from a government standpoint? In the U.S. and beyond. How do you think governments are going to play in this? What do you think, Deathstrike?
Oh yeah, like regulation as a reaction is gonna happen, right? Like when so many people got screwed by this, like it only accelerates what was probably going to happen anyway, in terms of government getting off its butt and working on things like regulation. The reality of it, like I think in an idealistic perspective, you'd want Web3 to be like completely decentralized and in a world where that model works. And looking forward to see the niches and when that works. In reality, like there's still going to be a lot of centralization and handholding on the way, right? And so, like government regulation with stable coins, things with crypto, like it's just going to kind of slowly creep its way in. And especially for us, unfortunately, as speculators, like we as free of a market as we can get means we can move fastest and capture a lot of opportunity. And so, yeah, like that's just going to happen. Like government regulation is going to probably pop in at some point. This only accelerates it, and we'll just kind of adjust as that information comes in. I think some of it's probably warranted and needed to help to truly help onboard like retail and other more normies onto crypto. Like you kind of need something a little more stable and structured, and regulation, even just the perception of it helps. At the same time, that also kind of slows us down from like a decentralized perspective. So they're just trade-offs to that.
Yeah. And does it also, just a follow-on question to that, right? Which is, does regulation also therefore make the markets, of course, safer for people, more comfortable for normies, let's say, and as a result, temper some of the upside that exists and some of the edge, right? Because more people come in, there's more competition at that point. Is that a likely result as well?
For me, it's hard to say just because like it depends on how the regulation's done, right? If it's done really, really poorly, that can, in a really odd way, create a different edge, right? Because it creates exploits. You're just adding a different rule set into the equation, and the earlier you can understand that rule set, and the earlier you can understand how that rule set plays into the market, it can help you from an edge perspective. So yeah, it comes down to what you think government can do, and if you think they can do it well. So that's again a different question for a different time, but happy to hear what McPuss thinks too.
Yeah, what do you think, McPuss? Go ahead.
Around regulation.
Yeah, and how governments are going to play in, and yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of Deathstrike's views on it. It's it's something we all knew was coming, and I think it's good that we finally are gonna get like some clarity on it. Because I feel like we've all just kind of just like been a lot of it's just we're gambling, just waiting for this regulation. And yeah, I think just the clarity, like it may set us back in the beginning, like oh shit, like we can't do this, we can't do that anymore. This is gonna have to be reported to the SEC, this, that, and the third. And yeah, it may set us back for who knows how long. But I think it gives us like a good footing to start going forward from there. So I used to hate regulation. I used to think like, oh fuck, I got into crypto, like, fuck the man, like, like I said, I got in buying stuff on the Silk Road and stuff. So like that was like my whole ethos around crypto, like privacy coins, all that stuff. But now looking at it, like I'm like, I think regulation is much needed, and I think just the clarity on it will be the best part. So we know, so we can figure out how to go forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then we'll still be early and be able to react to it. So, with that in mind, right? The question, of course, for us specifically in here is, how does all of this stuff that's going on with stables interact in your minds with NFTs, right? So when you have for example, when we have an issue like in the example of Terra, for instance, right, and there was a depegging and issues. How do things like that interact with NFTs? And this is also, I just want to call out, like, it's a personal question in terms of how you view it. So I think it's it's a really fun question to hear what everybody and what you two guys have to say about it, because I'm sure not everybody completely agrees in terms of impact there. But what do you think? You want to go ahead, Deathstrike?
I'm trying to make sure I have the question in a good place. Could you maybe repeat it a little bit?
Yeah. So how when things like this happen with stable coins, right? When there's a depegging that exists, or some other issue like that, what is the impact on the NFT market as a result of that? How do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I think short term people get scared, right? I think the NFT market is very much alive. Similar to what McPuss was saying earlier, it kind of runs in its own little bubble, which is really cool. I do think it hurts because like people getting into crypto is good from a trading perspective at the end of the day. You want more money entering, and what these scary things happen and all the kind of news headlines that kind of jump into it, in addition with all the lost liquidity, is it means fewer people are entering, right? And so that's not a great thing in the short term. But also in the medium longer term, it kind of elicits a response to help clarify some of this and maybe pave the way for like the next wave or what it may be, to have something a little bit more figured out and buttoned up from an ecosystem perspective, which helps again onboard more people in the future. And so, I almost see it as like a natural, like one step back, two steps forward. Although in crypto, sometimes it's like 5 steps back and 100 steps forward type thing, given the speed of it. And so that's how I kind of view things.
You can just envision it like as your normie friends outside. Like when something like that happens, they make fun of you only like 6 months later to be somehow in the market and like buying stuff. That's what it feels like at times. What do you think, McPuss? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I never really thought about how it affected NFTs, but I think I agree with everything Deathstrike said. It kind of definitely like a step back. I think the ripple effect was less felt on NFTs. Granted, there was a blanket effect over the whole of crypto. That includes NFTs, everything else. I think it was, like I said, I think it was less felt in NFTs. But yeah, I think like you were saying, we want to onboard more people, and I think just a lot of people not completely understanding that situation, and understanding that it was eventually going to happen. No one knew when. I think Terra and all that had definitely fell under, like, the Lindy effect. The longer it's around, the longer it's supposed to stay around. Um, but it just completely collapsed, and I don't know if I'd even call it a black swan. Like I said, it was bound to happen. But I think that definitely scared people off. Probably some people from onboarding that are a little misinformed on the situation. But like you said, crypto is definitely sometimes 5 steps back, 100 steps forward. So I'm, kind of just sitting on my hands right now. Just degenning free mints, but who knows when we'll get back to those 100 steps forward.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, before we kind of started on here. But what are your guys' thoughts on? I know you have some thoughts as it relates to bear market strategy and even airdrops and airdrop farming. So, like, how are you spending your time now, and what is your thoughts on strategy now? You go ahead, McPuss.
Okay, yeah. Right now, kind of just like, I'm outside a lot. And it kind of sucks. Like I missed, goblins. I missed we're all gonna die. I bought a mountain bike, so I'm outside all the time, all week. Just kind of, I have a bunch of money parked in stables. I'm at my computer when I can be. Um, but one thing I'm really trying to focus on, other than getting outside of my house and you know away from in front of my computer, is airdrop farming. I think that's going forward. We have what is it, Arbitrum, like hops today. Uh, Arbitrum Odyssey on the 13th or the 16th. But the one I'm really focusing on is the ZK airdrop. The ZK snarks and the whole ZK ecosystem. There's so many there's like, I don't know, Snarks, all these other ones. Yeah, just focusing on those. Yeah, it's I think airdrops are one of the coolest things. Just interacting with shit, dude. I'll interact with anything. Like I have so many wallets. I just interact with everything. If it doesn't have a token, I interact with it. Bridges, new protocols, everything.
That's pretty cool. Just out of curiosity, what do you use as your source for like finding out about these bridges or protocols or things? Do you use like Twitter predominantly? Like, how do you tend to find out about these and figure out like which ones are worth going after, for instance?
Yeah. I have two. I have there's two Twitter accounts I follow specifically for airdrops. Um, the other ones are just passing by and like seeing stuff on Twitter, like if someone posts something, or kind of, yeah, just kind of understanding or recognizing what doesn't have a token. Like we're in a crypto is a token economy. Like once you understand that, like oh shit, like a lot of the value add for a lot of these protocols is their token, even though 90% of the time, like look at OP airdrop, Hop airdrop, Stargate airdrop, or no, Stargate wasn't an airdrop, that was a raise on Curve. They're useless governance tokens at the end of the day, but it's free money. 90% of the time they're going to go to zero. I usually sell airdrops in the first 3 days or first day. But yeah, like I said, it's a token economy. That's how a lot of protocols gain users is drop a token. That's how they attract users. Unless you're like, I don't know if any of you guys use Matcha. Matcha's explicitly said from the beginning they'll never have a token. But I respect that, and I still use Matcha. I love Matcha.
Interesting. And what about you, Deathstrike? How do you view the bear market? What do you think is a good strategy? Where's your head at?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a boring old man, my strategy has always been a little bit more catered towards capital preservation. And so, I tend to, even when I'm risk on, I'm probably a little less gunslinger than most people here. Although I probably should be a little bit more gunslinger when it comes to like super bull markets. And I think a lot of, and like people mention this sentiment all the time, but as long as you survive and have liquid to work with, you can succeed incredibly in this space. It's just the time frames can vary pretty widely, right? Like we can go into a bear for like 3 6 months, a year, 2 years before we jump into a situation where it goes full bull. And at the same time, there's always opportunity, right? Like even now, right? Like NFTs, you can make a killing. Like you can still trade probably harder than before, sure, but like there'll always be opportunity. And so, for me personally, like kind of just taking some time off, touching grass. I also have been watching but not participating in the free mints. Like I didn't get in on goblins or we're all gonna die or anything like that. A lot of respect for the people hustling who do. It's like pretty incredible to see, pretty exciting actually to see like that market still operating the way it is, even with everything around it. And for me, yeah, look, it's probably going to be survival. I'm also pretty heavily parked in stables, have enough to kind of like ride through a few years if it need be, and then as soon as I can see like some turn and some greater bull opportunities, like I will again jump back in and play the game, if you will.
Yeah, never underestimate the power of the Degen force. Is the takeaway that I have. So we got some questions coming in. Also, this would be a good time right now to call out if anybody does have questions. Please drop them into guest questions now. We're gonna rip through at least a couple of them. So one question in from Tartoshi who wants to know what are your thoughts about the ETH merge and how that might affect NFTs and the price of ETH, seeing that it's around the corner. I think it is right around the corner. So I think it's kind of happening in the background. So what are your guys' thoughts there, if any?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly here. I think any news is good news when it comes to crypto markets. Now, news is kind of amplified by the market we're in, and so ETH merge should be helpful. If we were in a bull market, it would be one of those like super hyped speculative things where people try to like front run the news or buy on the news, like people FOMO in, right? And be like a bigger deal, I think, than it is unfortunately going to be now, because we're in a bear market. And there are enough macro forces that the news itself may not help that much, to be completely frank with you, just from a range of outcomes perspective. So I think that's the reality of things. Long term, I think it's helpful, right? Because you think about obviously moving more towards like better gas prices, and the deflationary stuff. Like it should certainly help, I think, in the long term. But from a pure short-term perspective, I'm very curious to see how much of a news impact it has. I almost treat it like any other, kind of, oh, like some news came out and people are anticipating this, and so how does that affect the short-term price action?
Yeah, that's interesting, and I wonder also, right? Like even before we started going into more of a bear, right? I feel like there was this outcome that existed, right? What happens if the rollout wasn't clean, right? And that could also at least short-term damage perception and things like that. And so I'm wondering if that outcome still exists, but we're in a bear, so it gets like somewhat tempered, right? But if the rollout is solid, if instead of, it's not going to pop in such a bear market, right? Like that's unlikely to happen. But at least if it protects the floor a little bit as well, right? In terms of what the true value is there, since it had a successful migration. I don't know. What do you think, McPuss?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, just what do you think about the ETH merge and how that might affect the price of NFTs and the price of ETH? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I echo exactly what Deathstrike said. I think due to market condition, it's more of a non-event than it would be. I think if we were more risk on, it would be a better bid. But I don't know, personally, I'm like, dude, I don't know, this trips me out. Like, I'm like, do I even want money on ETH? Like, I know it should be fine. I'm like, I think they just did Ropsten finally. Testnet finally went over to ETH 2.0, I think yesterday. So everything's going good. But yeah, I think it's kind of just a non-event. But in the long run, we'll probably see the effects of it. I don't know. I'm not it. The market's in such a shitter right now. I'm like, dude, it is what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a good bid.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's just like a lot, right? It seems like to overpower just all the macro stuff that's going on right now, it seems like it is a tall task. And the time optimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm going to pause there for a sec. We're nearing the end. If anybody has any other questions that they want to drop in, I see that we've got some crowdsourced or open sourced responses anyway, which is pretty awesome, on ZK, for instance. So thanks, Tartoshi, for chiming in there. But if anybody has any other questions, now would be a good time to drop them in. I'll just give it a second or two to see if anybody has anything, or forever hold your peace. No, I think that might be it. It might be a good time to wrap. So, guys, both of you, McPuss, Deathstrike, just really awesome. I really enjoyed it, to be honest, and in learning from you guys and how you think about stables and the different categories that exist of stables and implications and all those good things. It was super awesome. And, maybe we'll have a follow-up that exists if people want to dive deeper on a specific topic. Like I know USDT was something that you guys mentioned that maybe we can consider going deeper on, since it's a fun topic that always kind of comes up. So really appreciate you both coming on and all your thoughtfulness and everything. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for having us.
For sure. And thanks everybody else for joining. And same time, let's see, NFT NYC is not next week. So same time next week, we'll have one. We've got a special guest, different perspective. And then we'll be off the week afterwards for NFT NYC. But next week, same time, we'll see everybody on. So thanks everyone for joining.